This story takes place in the fall of 2016, right in the heat of the whole killer clown thing that was going on for a while. My cousin and I were both in middle school at the time, and I was staying over at his house one night. There were quite a few people in the house that night, including us, my aunt and uncle, and my younger cousins. It will be easier to understand the story by explaining the layout of the house and yard first. They lived in a rather large double-wide trailer that they bought that was positioned on a flattened part of a hill. Their driveway is a rather steep gravel slope that connected to the road at the bottom of the hill. Behind the house and up the hill was nothing but woods. My cousin and I were the only ones still awake this night, watching TV in the living room. We kept hearing noises in the woods behind the house. We could see into the woods from the window in the living room where we were sitting, but we didn't pay much attention to the noises since it was kind of windy. Plus, my uncle had lots of motion lights outside the house. The motion lights were positioned in the back facing the woods, the side door close to the driveway on the opposite side of the house, and on the porch that overlooked the front yard and the road. Because of all the motion lights, we weren't too worried about anyone or anything being outside, since anything out there would trigger the lights. We had heard lots of stories and watched lots of YouTube videos about the whole killer clown thing that was popular at the time. Personally, I didn't think that it was real. I thought it was just prank videos. Also, we live in a small town in northeast Tennessee where everyone owned some sort of firearm, including my uncle. We were never afraid of anyone dressing up as a clown and trying anything. The only lights on in the house were the TV and the dim light up above the kitchen sink that was only a few feet behind the couch. Suddenly, the motion detector light in the backyard turned on. We noticed, but we didn't think anything of it. The lights were set on a 10-minute timer, and if it detected movement, it would stay on and turn off after 10 minutes if no other movement was detected. After 10 minutes, they went back off, so we figured that it was just an animal, which wasn't uncommon. After about 20 minutes, I went to the bathroom down the hall. I did my business and washed my hands. But when I came out of the bathroom, the motion light on the side of the house by the side door that entered into the laundry room turned on. I could see it shining through the thin blinds that were on the door. I heard what sounded like footsteps on the gravel outside, and then the doorknob started rattling quickly like somebody was trying to open it. Luckily, the blinds were shut, so whoever it was didn't see me. I ran back into the living room to tell my cousin. My cousin had heard the same thing I did, because he was already up and halfway into his dad's room to wake him up. At that point, I saw the light from the front porch come on, so I got up to look out the window that looked out to the porch, but I couldn't see anything. My uncle had quickly grabbed his pistol and a flashlight and was out on the front porch looking for whoever or whatever it was. My cousin and I were behind him on the porch watching. He looked around with the flashlight for a bit, and eventually we saw something. There at the bottom of the hill in the ditch by the road was someone dressed up as a clown in a cheap-looking costume. The clown was facing up the hill towards us, and it just looked at us and waved. My uncle fired a warning shot, and the clown ran across the road and into the woods. My cousin and I didn't sleep anymore that night, while my uncle stayed out on the porch for a few more hours to make sure that nobody came back. I don't doubt that it could have just been a high school kid playing a prank trying to scare whoever was in the house. After reading some more experiences with these clowns of people's lives actually being threatened and in danger, it still scares me to think of what the clown would have tried to do if he was able to get inside the house. This happened just last summer. I live by myself in what I would describe as a typical apartment. I have one bedroom, a bathroom, kitchen, and living room pretty much. It's inside of a building in a fairly large apartment complex. So one night, I worked sort of late into the night at my job. I was really tired from the long day, and pretty much just arrived home, took a quick shower, and went to bed. That was around midnight. However, I woke up at roughly 4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, I wanted to get more sleep, but I was wide awake. I was also very thirsty and felt dehydrated. Sometimes, mostly in the summer, I wake up in the night because of dehydration, and obviously on this night I had worked late and not been able to drink as much. Then usually I drink some water and feel better immediately and then go right back to sleep. but some of the times when I wake up, I'm wide awake and can't go back to sleep right away, and this was one of those times. So what I usually do when that happens is get up and go into the living room and watch TV until I get sleepy again. That might be 15 or 30 minutes usually. So that was what I did on this night. I got out of bed, drank some water, immediately felt better, and then sat on the couch and turned on the TV. My couch is to the right of the front door to the apartment, about 20 feet away. I remember that when I sat down, I glanced over and happened to notice that my door was actually unlocked. I realized that I somehow had forgotten to lock it. Normally, I always remember, but I guess I forget sometimes. I went over and locked the door and then went back to the couch. I started watching TV and waited for myself to feel sleepy again. I was flipping around the channels for maybe 5 minutes when suddenly I heard a noise. Obviously, it was very quiet other than the noise from the TV, but the sound I heard was somebody trying to open the front door to my apartment. I really couldn't believe it, and I had no idea who it could be. I sat and listened, but didn't hear anything else. Then, after a moment, I got up and I walked over to the door. I looked out of the peephole, but nobody was there. Then I opened up my apartment door and looked into the hallway. That's when I saw him. There was a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt walking away from me down the hallway. He was mostly looking down at the ground, and then he went to another door and tried opening it, but this one was also locked. I watched him go to another door and try that one as well. Apparently, he hadn't noticed me opening the door. I didn't know who this guy was, but he was seemingly trying to get into any apartment. As he reached the end of the hallway, he suddenly looked behind him and then he saw me. When he did, I quickly closed the door. I was afraid that he would come back, but he didn't. Soon after, I went back to bed. I'm really glad that I woke up when I did that night and locked my door, or who knows what could have happened. Many years ago, I used to live in this crappy apartment by myself. I had a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit on the second floor of the building. During the time of this event, I'd been living there for over a year. So one night, I was by myself, and I had been home for several hours. It was about 9 o'clock at night or so, and I was hanging out in the living room. I remember that I kept hearing the sound of somebody walking down the hallway. Like I said, the apartment was not the nicest, and it was kind of old, so the walls were pretty thin, and you could hear whenever somebody walked down the hallway. But it wasn't a big problem, because the building was usually pretty quiet, and there were maybe 10 or 12 units total on my floor. So it didn't happen very often where people would walk by. But I seemingly heard somebody walk back and forth down the hallway about 10 times in the span of like 5 or 10 minutes. After hearing this person walk by, I got curious as to what was going on. I got up and walked over to my door, and then looked out of the peephole. After looking out for maybe 10 seconds, I heard footsteps. Then I saw a man walk down the hallway right past my door. He was kind of tall, thin, and had sort of long hair, and I didn't recognize him as anybody who lived there, but I figured that he probably did. After walking past my door, he went down the hallway. I kept watching for a little bit, and then I started to walk away. But I heard the footsteps then coming back, like he turned around, so I walked back over to the door and looked out of it again. This time, the man started walking by again, but right as he got even with my door, he suddenly stopped, and then he turned his head and looked directly at my door. It was like he could see me, and I quickly moved back. It was really creepy. The guy started standing there right in front of my door. I did not go back to look. Instead, I went back into the living room. But a short time later, I heard a knocking on my door. I had a bad feeling about it, knowing that it was the strange guy who was walking up and down the hallways. Obviously, I had no clue what he wanted, but I also didn't want to know. So I did not get up and go answer the door, but he continued to knock. He would knock for a few seconds, stop, and then knock again. This went on for several minutes. I got annoyed, and I eventually got up and went to look again. When I did, I saw this guy still standing there on the other side. He started knocking seemingly louder than before, now pounding on the door with his fists. Then he actually tried opening my door. It was locked, but I moved away again, hoping that he wouldn't be able to somehow get inside. He kept alternating between pounding on the door and trying to open it. After this went on for a while, I heard the sound of someone else's voice in the hallway. I recognized it as my neighbor Jerry, who lived across the hall and to the right. The guy stopped banging on my door, and I heard the two of them talking. Then, all of a sudden, I heard some shouting and what seemed like an altercation. I went over to the door, and this time I opened it. I saw Jerry laying on the ground and just barely saw the other guy sprinting to the end of the hallway and then leave. I went over to Jerry and asked if he was okay. Jerry said that the guy had punched him in the face and attacked him. I went and called the police, and then Jerry and I waited for them. Jerry was fine, but he said that he had wanted to see what all the racket was about because he heard the guy knocking on someone's door. He went out and questioned the guy, and he said at that point the guy just attacked him. The police looked around, but the guy had left the building. After that, the man did not return. I don't know why he was trying to get into my apartment or what he was even doing there. I feel bad that Jerry got beat up, but I'm glad that he was okay. The whole thing was very strange. I don't go on Facebook that much, but I do go on from time to time, and last year something really strange happened. One day I went on Facebook for the first time in probably a couple of weeks. When I did, I saw that I had one new friend request and clicked on it to see who it was. The person appeared to have the same exact profile as me. They had the same name as me and the same profile picture. It was like they were pretending to be me. I clicked on the profile, assuming it to probably be a bot, but this was really strange. There was not a whole lot that I could see right away on the page, so I accepted the friend request to see more. After I did, I saw that this person pretending to be me had posted several of the same pictures that I had on my page, but this profile only had one friend, which was now me. I was still thinking that it was a bot of some sort, and this was really weird. I sent a message to the person saying, "What's the meaning of this?" They responded back rather quickly, saying exactly what I had said to them. "What's the meaning of this?" I asked who it was, and they wrote back the same thing, just imitating what I said. It was really weird. I figured at this point that it was probably some kind of a prank. I got off of Facebook and texted a few of my friends about it. However, when I did, none of my friends admitted to it and didn't seem to know what was going on. I know my friends pretty well, and they all seemed genuinely confused. The next day, I was really curious as to who it was, so I went back on and sent another message to the page. This time, hoping that it was a joke somebody was playing on me for some reason, I said, "This is a funny joke, but seriously, who are you?" The page responded just saying, "This is not a joke." They finally said something other than just what I had said to them. I asked them to stop pretending to be me, saying that it was really weird. They responded saying, "Okay, I will just take your account then." I didn't know what they meant by this, but I was annoyed and I blocked the page right then and there. I thought that was that. The next day, however, I got a Facebook notification randomly saying that several people had liked my photo. I hadn't posted anything lately, so I went on to see. That's when I realized that my account had been hacked. There was a picture posted to my account. It was my profile picture, but put through several filters, and it looked really weird. Whoever was behind this said they would hack my account, and they did. I really couldn't believe it. I quickly deleted the post and then changed my password. I hadn't told my previous password to anyone, so I don't know how they would have even known it. After that, I didn't go on Facebook for a long time, and also strangely, the person never hacked into my account again or sent me another friend request or message. I still don't know who did that or why. It's very mysterious. Each year, when I was a kid, we would celebrate New Year's Eve and stay up late. Normally, I would go to bed at about 10 o'clock, but on New Year's Eve, I would stay up until around 2 a.m. My sister and my parents and I would play board games and watch movies. We would then watch the ball drop when it was midnight and would stay up for several more hours. I think this happened when I was about 12 years old. That time, like any other, we played games and watched a couple of movies. This continued well past midnight, and at roughly 2 a.m., we all got tired and finally decided to go to bed. We could sleep in the next day because nobody had work or school. Our house was on a pretty quiet street. Other than that, it was a pretty typical neighborhood. I stayed up a little bit later than everybody else that night because I was watching a movie in the living room. When it ended, I finally went to bed. I remember getting back into my bedroom and turning out the lights. When I did, I could see very clearly into the front yard because of the moonlight. There was a woman standing in our yard. She was not facing me, and I didn't recognize her. I walked over to the window, and when I did, The woman turned and faced me. She saw me and then started to walk closer into my direction. This really creeped me out. Nobody was supposed to be in our front yard. Nothing like this had ever happened before. I moved away from the window and hid. I ducked down and laid on the floor so that she couldn't see me. My window was pretty large, and I did not have a cover on it at the time. Now, my bedroom was also on the second floor, so she couldn't directly reach me, but I was still terrified. I waited there, just hoping that she would go away. A few minutes went by. Then I heard something hit my window. I wasn't sure as to what it was. I started watching my window, and something else hit it. The woman was throwing sticks at it. She was trying to get my attention, and I don't know why, but I got up. I carefully looked out of the window again. The woman was still there and looking right up at me, this time closer. She said something, but I couldn't hear her. Then I saw her motioning for me to let her inside. I was not going to do that. She then walked to the side of the yard near the front door. Then she knocked on the front door. I didn't move. I was hoping that my parents or sister would wake up. I didn't have the thought to call the police for some reason. It just never entered my mind. The woman knocked on the door on and off for like 5 minutes. Finally, she walked away. I watched her from the window walk to the end of the driveway and then a little ways down. She then got inside of a vehicle and drove off. The whole situation was really bizarre, and it really confused me. The next morning, I told my parents about it. They had no idea what she could have been doing either. Luckily, though, she never came back. This is something that happened back when I was a freshman in high school. I'm also a female, and this was about 10 years ago now. So the story begins when I got this friend request from a random guy on Facebook. I looked at his profile and saw that he appeared to be around my age, and we did have a couple of mutual friends. His profile said he went to a different high school, but it was one that was nearby in just the next city over from mine. I accepted the friend request because of this, and I was also slightly curious of how the guy knew about me. For the most part, he looked like a pretty typical kid though. Not long after I accepted his friend request, he sent me a message saying hi. I said hi back to him, and we started having a basic conversation. I don't recall everything said, but the conversation continued into the next day. I remember that's when he asked me if I wanted to hang out with him. Now, I had only just met him, and we went to different schools. He seemed nice to that point from talking, and I almost said yes, but then I ended up saying no at that point because I just didn't know him well enough yet. He said maybe some other time, and I said yes to that, but not making any official plans. For the rest of that day and into the next, we continued to talk on and off. Well, the next day, later on, after I got home from school, he told me that he was going to come to my house and pick me up. Once more, I did not feel comfortable to hang out with the guy yet. I told him that I would not be able to, but he didn't respond to me for a while. About 20 minutes later or so, he told me to come outside, saying that he was there. I got a bad feeling about it, and also realized now that this guy must be at least 16 years old if he was driving around. I walked over to the front of the house and saw that there was a car parked out on the side of the street. It was a red 4-door sedan that was kind of old looking. However, the windows were rather tinted and I could not see inside. I was really surprised that he had driven all the way to my house. At first, I felt kind of bad for him to drive all that way and not hang out with him. We had been talking for a few days, and most likely he wouldn't be a bad guy, so I almost walked outside and got into his car. But my parents were also home, and I would have to tell them where I was going, and I didn't think they would want me to go with this guy. After thinking about it for a minute or two, I decided not to go. When I said maybe we'd hang out another time, I didn't mean just drive to my house. He texted me on Facebook a couple more times, urging me to go outside already. I told him that I had some other place to go though, which wasn't true, but I didn't know what else to say. Eventually, he said okay, and he drove off. After he left though, I got the realization that I never told him my address. It sort of creeped me out that he knew where I lived. I didn't know how he would know this. We did have mutual friends on Facebook, so possibly he knew one of my friends and asked them. Either way, I was much less comfortable even talking with this guy anymore. However, despite that very same night, he continued to send me messages. I remember that this was several hours later, probably 9 or 10 at night. He asked me where I was and what I was doing. I told him that I was just in my room doing homework, which I was. After that, he did not respond right away. I don't remember what assignment I was doing, but I was pretty focused on it. I sat at my desk in the corner of my bedroom. About 20 minutes later, though, I heard this car driving down the street slowly outside. My bedroom was at the front end of the house, and I could see out to the street. We also lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and at this hour, it was rare for somebody to drive past. So hearing a car driving slowly just got my attention for some reason. I remember lifting up the blinds and glancing out the window. When I did, I saw this car moving very slowly and sort of pulling over to the side of the street, across from our house and a little ways down. That's when I realized this was the same red car with the tinted windows. I looked back to Facebook, but there were still no new messages. He hadn't told me that he was coming over again, and he didn't tell me to come outside either. I was expecting him to tell me again that he was there and to go with him like before, but he didn't. As the car continued to just sit there outside on the side of the street running, I kept an eye on it. After several more minutes, the driver's door opened. I saw a man get out, but it wasn't some 16-year-old kid. It was a grown man, probably like 40. He got out and started walking in the direction of our house. At this point, I quickly got up and ran out of my bedroom. I went towards the living room, and luckily my parents were both still up and in the living room. I didn't have time to tell them the whole story, but I alerted them of the guy walking. My dad got up and went over to the door. I looked through the front window, and by now the man was walking on the side of the street towards our house. My dad went over to the front door and opened it. When he did, the man kept walking farther away down the street, in the opposite direction of his car. My dad actually went outside and followed the guy, calling for him to stop. But at that point, the guy took off running. My dad did not run after him and came back inside. That's when I told my parents the whole story of how I thought I was talking to a kid my age, and also how he just showed up without me giving him my address. My parents called the police at that point, and my dad went and stood outside in the front door, seeing if the guy would head back for his car because it was still there. When the police arrived, the man was still nowhere in sight. They spoke with us, and then went out and looked for the man. He had to show up eventually because of his car, and when he did, the police got him. After that, I learned a valuable lesson about Facebook and social media. I was much more careful with who I talked to online for the rest of my high school career. It was a Friday night, and my friends and I decided to hang out at the park. We were bored, and the night felt perfect for some fresh air. Around 10 p.m., we heard a car approaching. It was slow, the headlights cutting through the darkness. At first, we didn't think much of it, but then we noticed it was moving towards us. As it got closer, we could see that it was an old beat-up sedan with the windows tinted, so we couldn't see who was inside. Probably just somebody passing through, I said, trying to shrug it off. But as soon as it got closer, the car stopped right in front of us. We looked at each other, unsure of what to do. The engine idled, and the driver's side window rolled down. Staring out the window that had just been rolled down was a clown, complete with a painted face and wild hair. He had a wide grin that looked more unsettling than friendly. "What's up, kids?" he shouted, his voice high-pitched, and he asked us if we needed a ride. We all exchanged nervous glances. Nobody said anything, and we just hoped that he would drive away. There was something off about him, his smile and the way his eyes seemed to be darting around. The clown called out to us again, saying, "Come on, don't be shy." My friend Sarah was the first one to say anything, as she whispered to us that we should leave, her voice shaking. She stood up, and we all followed her lead, backing away from the bench. "Wait, where are you going?" the clown asked, still grinning. "I'm just trying to be friendly," he said. We turned and ran towards the nearest exit of the park. I looked back once, and the clown was still sitting there, his smile now more sinister. We didn't stop running until we reached my house. Out of breath, we piled into the living room, slamming the door behind us. We tried to laugh it off, but the mood had shifted. We were all on edge, checking the windows to make sure that the clown wasn't following us. We eventually relaxed a bit and put on a movie. Hours passed, and at around 1 a.m. after the movie was over, my friends began to leave one by one. After the last one left, I locked the door and turned off the lights. I settled onto the couch, thinking I might finally get some sleep. But then I heard a faint sound outside. an engine slowly driving up the street. I walked quietly to the window and peeked through the blinds. There it was, the same old sedan from earlier, and the window rolled down with that same clown staring straight at my house. His face was illuminated by the dashboard lights, and his grin seemed wider than before. He just sat there, motionless, as if waiting for me to make a move. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself or risk being seen. I stayed away from the window, pacing in the dark. The engine continued to run, and I could hear the faint sound of some circus tune music playing. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I didn't want to look, but curiosity gnawed at me, so I moved back to the window to take a look outside. I could see the clown now tapping his fingers against the steering wheel, still wearing that disturbing grin. Suddenly, he turned his head towards my window, as if sensing I was watching. My heart stopped, and I ducked down quickly, wondering if he had seen me. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the car door slam. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of footsteps, but instead, I heard the engine rev and the car speed off into the night. That image of the car and clown inside scared me for a while, and for the next couple weeks I was paranoid, always checking around me if it was nearby, especially at night. This is something really bizarre that happened to me last winter. I live by myself in a smaller one-story home. The neighborhood that I live in is somewhat typical. However, I know most of the nearby neighbors pretty well and get along with all of them. Last winter, we got a pretty bad snowstorm at one point. It was over a weekend, and it started one night at roughly 5 o'clock. The snow was supposed to last until early the next morning, and we were going to get several inches of it. Everything was normal other than the snowstorm, and I went to bed at about 11 p.m. and then woke up the next morning at probably like 7:30 or 8. My bedroom is at the front side of the house, and as soon as I sat up and looked out of the window, something shocked me. There was a snowman that was built and looking right into my bedroom window. The snowman was very well done and had eyes and a mouth made from buttons. It was probably about 5 feet away from my window. It spooked me at first until I realized what it was. But then, I wondered how it got there. I certainly hadn't made it. It had to have been my next-door neighbor's kids. My next-door neighbors were a husband and wife who had kids in their early teens and middle school ages. They were the only kids in the immediate area of the neighborhood. Still, it seemed kind of unlike them to do that. Why wouldn't they just build it in their own yard? Plus, they were usually well-behaved, and I didn't think that they would even go into my yard without permission. I went outside to snowplow my driveway. When I got out there, I saw my next-door neighbor. His name is Todd, and he was already out using a snowblower. I walked over to him at the end of the driveway and waved. He stopped his snowblower and said that I had a nice snowman in the front yard. I told him that I didn't know how it got there and asked him if his kids had made it. He said no. He told me he had been inside with his kids watching a movie the night before. He assumed that I had made the snowman. We just joked about it after that, though. It was a pretty funny thing, but also a little bit strange. After that, I finished clearing my driveway and went back inside. The temperatures that we were having were in the high 20s all the way up to the mid-30s. This created good snowball or snowman snow. Fast forward to the next morning, I woke up and then went into the kitchen. The kitchen is at the back side of my house, and there's a window out to the backyard. When I looked out of it, there was another snowman. It hadn't been there the day before, and it was facing the back window, looking right at me just a few feet away. Somebody had made another one. This one, like the first, was very well made, but unlike the other one, it had some different props. Instead of just having a face made out of buttons, it had a gardening shovel used as its hand, and it was made to look like it was holding a pitchfork. I realized that the shovel and pitchfork had come from my garage. I went outside and then went to the garage. The back door was left open. Nobody was inside of it though. I was really creeped out now. Somebody was going into my yard in the middle of the night and making snowmen. This time they had entered my garage. I had left the door unlocked by accident, and I made sure to lock it. When whoever it was made a snowman in the front yard, I thought it was funny. But now that it was in the backyard and they went inside of my garage without permission, this was too far. Still, I had no idea who was doing it. At night, I never heard or saw anything. That night, I even looked out of the windows multiple times before going to bed. I didn't see anybody though. The next morning when I got up, both of the snowmen were destroyed. They were just gone and nowhere to be seen. Somebody had tore them down. I was really weirded out by the whole situation. After that, there were no more strange occurrences though. No more snowmen and no more strange things happening. I still wonder to this day who did that. This is the story of the time that I got a job from Craigslist. Years ago, when I was in college, I hardly had any money. I was really busy, and I remember during the summer one year, I got this internship, but I didn't get paid anything for it. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have too many expenses, but I still wanted to have a little bit of money. I couldn't get a job because I didn't have enough time in my schedule. But that gave me the idea to look on Craigslist for something that I could do on a weekend sometime. I knew that there were people who would pay money for you to do yard work for them or something. And yard work was exactly the type of thing that I was looking for. I was pretty confident in my skills, and after looking on Craigslist for a couple of days, I saw an ad that interested me. It was a man who said he needed somebody to do quite a bit of work on his property. The job would take several hours at least, but he was willing to pay good money for it. And the guy also said that there was potential that he would need work done again another time. The ad did not have a specific day, but said to contact him for more information. So I reached out, and pretty quickly I got a response. We arranged a meeting of basically a job interview at a local restaurant. The man's name was Robert, and he seemed to be a nice guy. He said that he owned several houses in the general area. Some he was fixing up to sell, and others to rent. He recently bought a house that needed a lot of yard work done to the property. He said that if I wanted, he might need me for another property in the future as well. The man asked me what day I would be available to work, and I told him. So he gave me the address of the house and said that I could have the job. When the date we agreed on several days later came, I drove to the house and got there when I was supposed to. Robert was not there, but he was at another one of his properties. He said that when I was almost done working to text him and he would come by and pay me. Then I started work. The property of the house was a little bit out there in the country. I was supposed to mow the grass, do some weeding, pick up all the tree branches and stuff in the yard, and then plant a bunch of these flowers that the guy had. The yard was pretty large in both the front and backyard, and at the end of the backyard was a large woods. I'm not sure if that was still his property or not, but I believe at least part of it was. It was definitely a lot of work, but I didn't mind it too much. About an hour in, when I was mowing the grass on the guy's riding mower, I saw something off. I was in the backyard and a good distance away from the house, but I saw what looked like a man staring at me from inside a window to the house. It really took me by surprise, because I was under the impression that the house was empty. I thought that maybe someone was renting the place or something like that. As I kept mowing, I looked over a few more times. When I got a little closer, the man suddenly moved away from the window. I didn't get a good look at him, but later on, I remember that I was mowing in the front and I saw him again. He was once more staring in my direction. When we made eye contact, he didn't move away this time. Instead, he continued to stare at me. I had to look away because it was really weird. I tried to just ignore it though. Soon I finished with the lawn and then went on to the gardening. Once more though, as I was doing this, I noticed the guy staring at me. Not too long after that time, I remember that I got a call from the owner of the house. He was just asking me how things were going and said that he would come by in a little bit. I said that it was going good, but then I decided to ask him if somebody was renting the house. The man said no, the house was currently vacant. I told him how there was a guy inside that kept staring at me. The man told me that he was going to call the police, and he was also going to come over as soon as he could. He recommended that I go to my car and wait in there until the police arrive. I took his advice, and I stopped working and went to my car. I was parked on the side of the street out front, and I kept looking to the windows but no longer saw the man. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived, followed by the homeowner about 2 minutes after that. He opened up the house for the police and they went inside. About 10 minutes later, they came out and said that the place was empty. The man must have left. I was very confused because I hadn't seen him leave, so it had to be out the back. Robert went inside and said that he saw evidence that somebody else had been there. I didn't go in the house, so I don't know if something was stolen or what, but I was glad that he didn't think I was crazy or making it up. The police looked around the front and backyard briefly and then left. Before Robert left though, he said that he trusted that I would finish and he paid me. I was in fact going to finish, so I stayed there and I continued gardening. I was almost done, and it took me only like 20 or 30 more minutes to finish. When I was done, I was taking the weeds and tossing them in the woods like I was supposed to. As I approached the entrance of the woods, I saw the man again. He was standing pretty deep in the woods, partly behind a tree. I'm not sure if he knew that I saw him or not. I tried to play it off and I calmly walked away. I was really glad that I was done with work. I quickly went to my car and then left. I called Robert and told him that the guy was back. After that, I went home. I'm not sure who that guy was or how he got into the house, but that was a really creepy. So, me and my friends used to have this group chat that was mostly for sending stupid memes. Occasionally, we'd talk about hanging out, but it was always the same thing. People would say, yeah, for sure, and then never actually hang out. The group was me, Emily, David, and Ryan. Ryan was your typical guy, always getting into weird situations and trouble. He was constantly meeting sketchy people on eBay or Craigslist, trying to make a quick buck off random stuff he had lying around. One day, Ryan was selling his four-wheeler and asked us to come with him because he didn't trust the buyer. We told him, if you don't trust him, why sell it to him in the first place? But Ryan didn't get what we were trying to say. He barely even acknowledged that it was a red flag. We were all confused as to why he wasn't seeing what seemed obvious to us. We told him to just leave it and wait until he could find a more trustworthy buyer, but he didn't listen. He told us the deal was on the south side of the city, which was the sketchiest area imaginable. That side of town was notorious for crime and kidnappings. That was the biggest red flag of all. None of us wanted to go, but Ryan wouldn't listen. Throughout the day, he was snapping us updates about getting his stuff ready and making progress on the sale. I messaged one of the other friends in the group chat privately and told them, I don't think we should let him go over there. They replied, why not? He's a grown man. If he gets into trouble, that's on him. We warned him. I thought that was a pretty stupid reason to abandon a friend who might get himself into serious trouble. No one else was listening to me though, and they insisted I was overreacting. They said if Ryan needed to learn a lesson, then so be it. Hours went by and Ryan was at the person's house. We kept checking up on him because, like I said, the whole thing felt wrong. He kept snapping us back, reassuring us that everything was fine and that we were overreacting. But still, we couldn't relax until we knew he was safe. Then he sent a snap of himself in a basement. We all thought, why are you in their basement? Someone even commented, what are you doing down there? But he didn't respond, which was really odd. I figured maybe he was busy talking to the buyer and just wanted to update us. But then he snapped another picture from a different room in the basement. It was getting weirder and weirder each snap. Still, we ignored it because we figured if he was snapping us, he must be okay. The next snap was in a dark room showing someone's feet, but they weren't Ryan's feet. That's when we realized someone else had taken Ryan's phone and had been snapping us the whole time, pretending everything was fine. We started panicking. We tried to check his location, but the person who had his phone turned it off. We knew something was seriously wrong and that we needed to act fast, but we didn't know what to do. We tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. We thought about contacting his family, but none of us knew them. We were stuck. Someone suggested driving to the area to try to find his car, but we knew that could take hours and maybe even days, and it wasn't a guaranteed plan because we didn't even know the location. The next snap came in and I nearly lost it. It was a photo of fresh blood on the floor, wet, bright red, and horrifying. We all froze. That's when we realized we weren't just overreacting. Something terrible had happened. We immediately FaceTimed each other and tried calling the police from someone else's phone. But without any concrete evidence or location, we couldn't do much. We were completely out of luck. We all went to bed that night, frantic and unable to sleep. Days and weeks passed, and we didn't hear a thing from Ryan. Then, about 6 months later, we saw his face on the news. He'd been reported missing. I thought to myself, if we had just gone with him or stopped him, maybe we could have done something. After months of searching, the police gave up. Then, out of nowhere, someone found Ryan walking down the highway in nothing but his underwear and shoes. He looked starved, barely alive. When we finally got the full story in the group chat, we couldn't believe what had happened. To be honest, I can't even talk about it. It's too gruesome and traumatizing. I'm just glad that Ryan is alive. This happened last year and still creeps me out when I think of it. So I was at home one night by myself. I was just in my bedroom scrolling through my phone. All of a sudden, I saw this Snapchat notification from a name that I did not recognize. I was curious, so I went to Snapchat and opened the snap to see. It was a selfie of what appeared to be a man. However, this photo was taken extremely close to his face, and he also appeared to be in a very dark room. I could barely see his face at all, and didn't recognize it to be anybody that I knew. The picture honestly looked very creepy. There was no words with the picture, and that was it. I guess at some point, I must have become friends with this guy. I didn't know when though. I had Snapchat for probably 10 years. I did not send a picture back, but instead typed a message for the guy, asking who he was. Then he sent another photo. When I opened it, I saw that it was much like the one before. It was honestly so creepy. I wish I would have screenshotted it, but I didn't. I thought that maybe the person sent a picture like this by mistake, but after the second one, I realized that it was not. I asked again who it was. The person's response, though, really shocked me. He simply said, "I'm coming over now." I thought that he had to be joking, but I also realized then that I had my location on Snapchat. I quickly went into the settings and turned my location off. If this guy was serious, I was hoping that he would not know where I was. Then I blocked the mysterious guy. I thought that was it. I returned to what I was doing, but I couldn't help but feel a little bit creeped out by the whole thing. Well, roughly 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. I had a terrible feeling instantly. I think by now it was like 10-something at night. Not a normal time for somebody to come to the door. I carefully left my bedroom and went down the hallway. Eventually, I got to a window that I could look out and see who was there. When I did, I saw a man wearing a ski mask standing there. I couldn't believe it. The guy must have got my location before I had turned it off. I watched him knock on the door again. Then he started to look around. When he did, I quickly moved back and away from the window. I heard the guy walk off the step, but did not know where he was going to. The next thing I knew, I heard him right outside one of the main windows. I ran back into my bedroom and then called the police. I locked my bedroom door and covered my window. Then I just waited. I did not hear anything during this time. I wasn't sure what was going on, if he was trying to break in or maybe if he left. About 10 minutes later is when the cops arrived. They came to the front door and I told them about what happened. They offered to look around, and I almost said that they didn't have to, but I ended up saying sure. Then they looked around my backyard, and surprisingly found the man hiding in some bushes. When they located him, they asked him to come out. He ignored them and then tried to run. However, the police caught up with him before he left the yard. It was the same guy who had been Snapchatting me. I'm not sure what his plans were. I'm just glad that he was caught. When I was a freshman in college, I lived in the dorms and I got a random roommate. I thought that it would work out fine because I get along well with most people and make friends pretty easily. I figured that my roommate would probably get along with me as well, even if we didn't like the same things. Obviously, I hoped that he would have similar interests and maybe we could become good friends, because I didn't really know anybody else at the university that I was going to at the time. Well, when I moved into the dorms, my roommate was not there. His name was Ryan, and his stuff was there, but I wasn't quite sure where he was. After my parents had helped me finish moving in all my stuff and left, Ryan was still nowhere in sight. In fact, he did not show up until the next day. It was when I got back from my first class and had a little bit of time left before my next one. When I entered the room, Ryan was just there, sitting at his desk and apparently doing homework. Ryan was about average height and weight, had glasses, and short blondish colored hair. Right away, he did not seem very friendly. When I entered the room, he turned and looked at me, but did not say hi or anything. Just as fast as he looked at me, he turned his head back to his desk. I said hi and walked over to him and stuck my hand out for a handshake. I remember he sort of hesitated, but did shake my hand. I had a brief conversation with him, asking him about himself. He was not a freshman like me, but a sophomore at the school, and he was from a small town several hours away. That was really all that I gathered. Soon, I went to my next class. After that, things only got more and more strange. Ryan was not often in his room, but when he was, I would sometimes try talking to him. He would usually give me very short answers and never ask me anything about myself. I thought maybe he was just shy or uncomfortable around other people, but at one point, he told me in a very stern way to stop talking to him and to not talk to him anymore. It was pretty rude, and I no longer felt like he was just a shy kid, but a kind of rude one. Still, I didn't want it to be a terrible semester, so I chose not to argue or anything. I decided to just let him be on his side of the room, and I would do my thing on my side. As the weeks went on, Ryan would be gone for sometimes days at a time. I would wake up and he would just be gone. Then when it would be nighttime, he still wouldn't be there, and I wouldn't see him for several days. Then, typically, he'd just walk into the room like nothing happened, or I'd come back and he'd already be there. I never bothered to ask him where he was though, knowing that he didn't want me talking to him. I remember at one point, on one of the days that he was at the dorm, he left sometime in the evening. Hours later, at probably like 11 o'clock at night or so, I remember I heard talking in the hallway. It got louder, and I realized that two guys were arguing. I recognized Ryan's voice to be one of them. He loudly told the guy to shut up, and a few seconds later, he walked into the room. I found out the next day that it was another guy who lived on our floor who he yelled at. Apparently, all the guy said to him was, "Hey, how's it going?" when they passed each other in the hallway. Ryan snapped at him immediately, telling him not to talk to him, which made the other guy angry. They argued briefly before Ryan walked away. I found this out because the other guy came up to me and told me that my roommate was really strange. That's when we had the conversation, and I was kind of creeped out by Ryan's erratic behavior. As the next few weeks went on, I was hoping to be able to get a new roommate when the next semester rolled around. In the meantime, I just ignored Ryan and he did the same to me. It really wasn't that bad because he was typically gone, so it was mostly like I had my own dorm to myself. You just never knew when Ryan would be back or how long he would be there. So one day, I remember that I got up and went to class. Ryan had been gone for the whole night and was still gone when I got up and left. I was away for several hours attending my classes. When I returned to the dorm room, I went inside to see everything on my side of the room just gone. It was the craziest thing that I'd ever seen. The bed, desk, and chair that came with the room were still there, but literally everything that I had was gone. My books, my blankets and pillows, clothes, snacks, and everything was nowhere in sight. Ryan's side of the room looked exactly the same, and Ryan was not there. I went inside the room and looked around, trying to figure out what happened. I was sure that I locked the door when I left, and I immediately suspected Ryan. I started to look on his side of the room. He really didn't have that much stuff to begin with. He really just had some clothes, a few blankets, and some notebooks. There was no place that he could have put all my things. After realizing that my stuff was definitely not in the room, I walked out into the hallway. I went to the resident assistant and told him what happened. We did a small investigation looking around the building, and soon we got in touch with campus security. Unfortunately, the dorm building was really old and did not have any security cameras inside of it. Luckily, I had made a few friends by that point in the school year. One had a dorm room all to himself, so I stayed in his spare bed for the next couple of nights. An investigation was done, and Ryan was nowhere to be seen. Several days later, though, my things were found. They were located a little ways into a woods just off campus. He had tossed all my stuff there. Ryan, meanwhile, did not show up for the entire rest of the semester. I was given a new dorm room all to myself by the school, and they also gave me a gift card to buy some new stuff, so that was nice. But as far as I'm aware, Ryan never showed up to campus again. I have no idea where he went. He was a very strange guy, but I'm glad that I didn't have to live with him any longer. I was selling a desk on Facebook Marketplace a few years ago. It was a pretty nice desk in my opinion, and I had bought it from IKEA just 2 years prior. However, I was going to be moving and I decided to get rid of it. During this time, I lived in a smaller house by myself. I remember that after I made the listing for the desk, it took a couple of days before I got any responses. When I did, I got a message from a man named Charlie. He said that he wanted to buy the desk. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation between us other than that. I was happy that somebody wanted to buy it, and I made sure that he was good with the price, which he said that he was. I thought the price was reasonable, so I was glad to hear that, and then I gave him my address. We agreed that he would come by the next evening at about 5 o'clock. And when the next evening rolled around, I had the desk just inside of my front door for Charlie to come and buy. He got there at about 5, and I let him inside of my house. Charlie was skinny with somewhat curly blondish hair. He was wearing a sweatshirt. After we said hi to each other, I showed Charlie the desk and I told him that I could help him take it to his car. Charlie went up close to the desk and looked at it. After a short time, he told me that the desk did not look like it did in the pictures. I asked him what he meant. I was very confused because it was exactly the same as the pictures. I had taken them just days prior when I had listed the desk, and I really hadn't touched it since. Charlie said that it just wasn't how he thought it would be. Then he said that he decided not to buy it. I was disappointed, but I said okay. Then he turned and left. I was confused by what he had said. I'm not sure what exactly he was expecting, because in my opinion, the desk was just as it was advertised in the listing. I decided to just move on, and hopefully somebody else would want to buy it. So the night went on, and I ended up staying up pretty late. It was nearly midnight. I was in the other room, and I heard the sound suddenly of somebody trying to open the front door. When I heard this, I walked over and looked out of a front window. I saw a man standing there, wearing a hat that was mostly covering his face. But I then realized that this was Charlie. I didn't know what he was doing. After literally trying to open my front door, he then walked away, but he didn't leave. Instead, he walked around to the back side of the house. He tried that door, which thankfully was locked. After that, things were quiet for a bit. Then he returned to the front. This time, he actually knocked on the front door of the house, but I was not going to answer it. After being at the front door, he moved to several windows. It seemed like he was trying to look inside. I had covers for most of them, but I could still see his shadow on the other side. After he was still in my yard prowling around for that long, I decided to call the police. I told them the whole story, and within 10 minutes, an officer was there. Meanwhile, Charlie had stayed there the whole time. When the police arrived, he tried running, but was quickly caught. He did not break in, and I think he ended up getting off for the most part. I have to think, though, that he was trying to find a good place to break into my house. I'm really glad that he didn't. This happened one summer afternoon in 2018 when my partner, my stepdad, and I decided to check out an abandoned factory near my parents' house. We were just picking up my partner when we passed by it, and without thinking much about it, we started talking about exploring the place. My stepdad, who tends to act on impulse like us, pulled over right by the building and we decided to go for it. It didn't take long to find a way inside. The factory was falling apart with broken windows, walls crumbling down, and most of the roof was missing. The only real obstacle was a doorway that had some debris in front of it. We cleared that away, and as soon as we stepped through the door, something felt off. It was the middle of the summer, but the air inside the building was freezing cold. I don't mean it was a little chilly, it felt like winter. It wasn't even a damp kind of cold, like what you would expect from an abandoned building. And anyway, there was enough holes in the walls and roof that it shouldn't have been that cold. The inside was just as trashed as the outside. Piles of broken machinery, rusted metal, and old wooden beams lay scattered around. As we moved farther into the building, my partner and stepdad went ahead to check out another room, and I wandered off by myself to look through some cabinets that had been left behind. It was like everything had just been abandoned overnight. Files, worker IDs, and even older sheets from the late 90s and early 2000s were scattered everywhere. Most of the orders were packed and ready to be shipped, but none of them had ever been sent out. My stepdad pointed out how strange that was, and the factory looked like it had been closed for many decades, even though the most recent date I found was 2002. The building at most had been abandoned for 16 years. I have no expertise in something such as how quickly buildings decay, but the whole place seemed very run down for only 16 years. As we were talking about how weird the place was, I started feeling something else. It wasn't just the cold or the dust or the abandoned vibe. I was getting a feeling of danger, like something was watching us, or maybe waiting for us to leave. I can't describe it any better than that. It was like my fight or flight response kicked in, but I didn't know why. I told my partner and stepdad, and they agreed that we should head out. It was odd, and we hadn't heard anything or seen anything strange, but we all felt it. We made our way back to the car, and just as we were pulling away from the building, my partner and I both noticed something. In the doorway we had just come through, standing there, was a figure. It was hard to make out clearly. It kind of looked human, but not exactly. Something about it didn't sit right. It was like a person, but not. The figure didn't move, as it just stood there, staring at us. My stepdad didn't seem to notice since he was too busy driving. My partner and I looked at each other at the same time and asked if we had seen that thing in the door, so it was definitely not our imagination. We never went back to the factory. I can't shake the feeling whenever I drive past the building to my partner's house. I drive past the abandoned factory so often, and I wish I had never gone inside, because I think about it every time I drive by. Not too long ago, I was watching YouTube videos with my girlfriend. We were at my apartment just hanging out at night. I have an apartment that's not the greatest. It's on the first floor, and I have a little patio that goes outside from the living room through a sliding glass door. Overall, it's fine though. So like I said, my girlfriend was over and we were just sitting on the couch watching TV. We watch YouTube or whatever all the time. It was probably like 9 p.m. or so. Suddenly, the screen went black for a moment, and then we were seeing some random phone screen. We were both very confused at first, but soon realized that someone must have connected their phone to my TV by mistake. There's a lot of apartment units close by, so you can connect to other people's devices if you really want to. We were seeing the phone screen of whoever this was going through their apps. I figured they would disconnect after realizing they were connected to my TV and not their own, and I expected the screen to return to what we were doing. In the meantime though, I was kind of interested to see what this person was doing, so I didn't bother to get up and turn off the TV or anything. The person then went into the Photos app on their phone. Then they started scrolling through them one at a time. It didn't take me long to see myself among these photos. There were pictures taken straight from my social media pages, such as Facebook and Instagram, just screenshots of them. And then there were pictures of my girlfriend as well. All kinds of pictures of both of us, from both my Facebook and her Facebook as well. And the more this went on, the more confused and creeped out we were. There were probably 10 photos of each of us, and this went on for several minutes. My girlfriend and I were talking to each other in disbelief, wondering who this was and what they were doing. Then, just like that, their phone disconnected. My TV returned to its home screen, and I was left wondering what on earth had just happened. But less than 5 minutes later, as my girlfriend and I were talking to each other trying to figure out what was going on, there was suddenly a knock at my apartment door. I rarely get anybody knocking on the door, so as soon as it happened, we both stopped talking instantly. After a moment, I got up and walked over to see who was there. When I got there, I didn't see anybody. I was even more paranoid now. I figured whoever had connected to the TV had just knocked on my door. We were very confused, and eventually sat back down on the couch and tried to forget about it. We went on the YouTube app again and tried to play a video to take our mind off of things. Meanwhile, my sliding glass door in the room was mostly covered by blinds, but there was about 2 feet at the end that wasn't, as they weren't closed all the way. A few minutes into watching YouTube again, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye. You couldn't really see anything outside with some light being on in the apartment and it being dark out, but I did notice that someone was really close to the window in the opening of the blinds. I looked closer, and the person came closer. Then I realized that there was a man wearing a black ski mask with his face right on the other side of the glass, looking in. My girlfriend noticed him just after me and screamed. She got up and ran out of the room, as I stood up and backed away in shock. Then, very quickly, the masked man turned and ran off into the night. I went over and closed the blinds entirely. Then I made sure that every door and window was covered and locked and all that. I was very paranoid for the rest of the night, but nothing else happened. And since then, there have been no other occurrences like that. It could have just been an elaborate prank, but that was a little bit far to be taking things in my mind. And I also have no idea who would do that kind of a prank to us. My girlfriend and I still get a little bit worried that something like that might happen again when we're at my place at night. And we also have no clue who it was that could have done it. I'm just hoping that they don't return. A couple of years ago, my phone broke. It had been pretty old, and I was sort of meaning to get a new one. But after breaking, I had to find a new one fast. I thought about going to the store or looking online. But to try to save some money, I went on Facebook Marketplace. I also wanted to get one as fast as possible. I had heard there were a lot of good cell phones there for cheap. After maybe 30 minutes of looking, I found one. It was the same phone that I had before, but a few generations newer. The price also seemed very cheap compared to what it would be elsewhere. So at that point, I decided to send the seller a message saying that I wanted to buy the phone. Now, the seller's Facebook account was pretty mysterious. Their name was just JM. I clicked on their profile, and they did not have a profile picture. There wasn't much information about them either. Still, I didn't think that was too big of a deal, and I contacted them. It did not take long before I heard back. The seller, Jay, I guess, told me that I could buy the phone as soon as that night, and I agreed. I suggested that we meet at a local shopping center. However, Jay said they could not do that because they had kids and could not leave their house. Instead, I was supposed to come over that night. I said okay, and I agreed to it. I understood that people with kids probably wouldn't be able to just go whenever. So I was given an address, and that night I drove to it. It took maybe 15 minutes to get there. It was a little bit far away in an area that I had never been before. When I got to the address, I saw that it was a house that looked slightly run down, and there didn't appear to be any lights on inside. The whole neighborhood looked a little bit run down, and the houses had fairly large properties. I had no way of texting the seller that I was there because of my phone being broken, but I had my watch, and I was right on time for when we agreed. So I walked up to the front step and rang the doorbell. After maybe 30 seconds, the door started to open. There were two doors, a screen door and then an actual one. The inside door opened just a few inches, and I saw a woman was standing behind it. She told me to go around to the back and then close the door. So I walked around to behind the house and then entered a back door there. This led into a dimly lit kitchen area. The woman was there inside and sitting at a table. I entered and then sat down across from her. It appeared as though every light in the rest of the house was off. We both just sat there in awkward silence for a few moments. Then I mentioned the phone, saying I would like to buy it. The woman said that she would go and get the phone and got up. I kept sitting at the table. She left the room and I waited at the table. The whole thing so far had seemed really strange. As I looked around, I saw no signs of her having kids. So I waited at the table for at least a good 5 minutes. I didn't know what was taking so long. Did she lose the phone or something? I decided to ask. I called out asking if she was okay, and she called back from the other room saying yes, and it would just be a moment. So I kept sitting there, but then at least 5 more minutes went by. I was starting to feel nervous. It was just really strange. When she left the room, she didn't turn any other lights on either. I could barely see around the kitchen as it was. Eventually, I got impatient and I stood up. I walked to the end of the kitchen and to the entrance of what appeared to be the living room. There was no sign of the woman. I called out again, asking what was taking so long. This time, though, I got no response. I kept standing there looking into the living room, and there was a hallway at the end of it. It was really dark, like I said, but after standing there for like a minute, I thought I saw the woman cross the hallway. She did not bother to say anything or acknowledge me. This was really weird. I walked back into the kitchen. I thought about things, and then I decided to just leave. This whole situation was creeping me out, and I didn't know what was going on. So I walked over to the back door, left, and then walked back out to my car. When I did, I looked back at the house. I saw now that one of the lights was on in a front window which hadn't been before. The woman was looking out of that window and staring at me from inside. It just really creeped me out. I got back inside of my car and drove home. After that, I went and bought a cell phone from the store.